Welcome, friends. My name is Martin. If you followed me long enough, you know that I love narratives in all of my games, whether I'm playing fantasy war games or if I'm playing my space games. Narrative has always been something very important to me. Now, with respect to space games, particularly battles that take place in space with starships, I always found something missing. Something not necessarily within the rules, because there are some awesome rules out there. But it's the way space is treated. The fact that in reality, space is a very hazardous environment. Not only would your starships be fighting against whatever opponent is against you, you're also fighting against space itself. You know, the environment itself is pretty deadly. Now, there are some regions in space where, yes, it wouldn't be as bad as other regions, but one of the most important things that I realized is that I was missing something in my games, and that's why my games seemed so bland. And that is, in part, the star and what effects the star has on the system. Because the reality is that the star dictates everything that goes on in the system. It is the engine that makes or breaks the planets which orbit around it and all the heavenly bodies as well. So that's one reason for writing Star Builder. Now, in Star Builder, I've created a whole series of cards, and this is something that I've been improving little by little. And in this video, we're going to see the new deck, which is the Solar Infrastructure deck. Now, I've already showed you the architecture deck for a solar system. Now we're going to look into the solar infrastructure. This is where we get to play with our societies, our spacefaring societies. So let's go to the tabletop and check out this new deck, and then we can look at an example of Void Admiral where I could use these cards to plan out my campaign. So these are the different sets of cards, and I've already explained many of these in a previous video. We went over how to make a little solar system with the different cards. Let's go straight to the new deck, which is the infrastructure deck. And this is quite the deck. It has quite a few cards. I've separated a few. So just to give you an idea, interstellar communication network, have a relative in a neighboring star, don't want to wait 8 years for a response, set up an orbital FTL comlink for instant communication. Little things like that, radiation shield tech. We have no gravity, thin atmosphere robotic fighters. We have icebreakers and harvesters. We have a bunch of different things here that represent possible infrastructure for your planets, whatever society you have. So, for example, planet-side industrial district. We also have some new interplanetary distance cards. We're going to see in just a minute how I use that. We have orbital defense cards. We have civilization ruins. And we also have lunar cards, moons, because moons are very important. They're often the stepping stone for solar infrastructure as your society is developing. We have wild biome for those backwater planets. Again, another planet-side industrial district. Asteroid mines, tech hub. This is a city. City is a major producer and exporter of high technology. So let's see now how we use all of these cards together to plan out not only the solar system, the civilization, but also we can use it as a campaign tracker to develop our narrative as well. So a lot of this is going to depend on the game you're playing. We're going to use Void Admiral as an example because it's a game I know better. And we're also going to use a couple of the factions from Void Admiral. So it's going to depend on what factions your game has. Most miniature agnostic games are also going to be very open with their narratives so that you can develop your own stories. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so I've chosen my star, and I chose a red dwarf, and we're going to name it Wolf 339. Now, the real Wolf 339 is a very grumpy little star. We're going to say that this star has been pretty mild for the past few hundred years until now. Things are going to change a little bit because of course they are. Now, red dwarfs are known, these systems are very small, very compact. The distances between planets, between the orbits, are going to be very short. And we now have a new card to actually represent that. And that is this card here, the interplanetary distance. And the distance is very short. And the reason why I made this card is that in this kind of representation, it's very abstract. And so this at least gives me an idea that these are orbits that are closer together. Now it says, worlds separated by very short distances, low fuel consumption, and active shipping lanes. That gives me an idea for the infrastructure of the society that we are going to construct. Now, I'm going to choose, since we are doing Void Admiral, I'm going to choose the merchant faction. So we're going to say that the merchants came down from a neighboring system, and they found Wolf 339, and now they've colonized it. They've been here a couple of hundred years, enough time to make an enclave of the world, the first world here. And actually, I'm going to do this. I'm going to put the interplanetary distance card in the middle there. That's going to be more important. And now the habitable zone is right up, right next to the star, which is the way that, as we remember from Star Builder, red dwarfs, that's where the habitable zone is, right up in front of the star. Now, the world, we haven't come up with a name for our world, but that's okay. The world is going to be tidally locked, and that's very normal in the first habitable zone near a red dwarf. You're more often than not going to have a tidally locked world. These are very interesting worlds. One side of the planet, one hemisphere, is going to be eternal day. The other side is going to be eternal night. They're very interesting worlds. They can also be very harsh worlds. Now, the middle of the planet, that's called the terminal belt or the twilight belt. And that's because here, this is the best area for colonizing the planet. Or if there's going to be any life that develops in that world, that's the best area. Now, remember, this little star spits out a lot of radiation, and we do have new cards for that. We have solar windstorms, which we're going to add to our system. We're going to put it up there. And we have razor clouds. That's what I call them. Space is not an empty vacuum. It is filled with micrometeorites and particles ejected from the star at incredible speeds. These particles constantly impact starship hulls and shields, damaging them. That could give us an idea for little house rules later in our scenarios, okay? So we're going to leave those stars there. This is the solar, different effects that stars can have. Solar winds, solar flares, gamma rays and X-rays, which can also give you EMP effects. This is for grumpy stars. Our star is starting to get a little grumpy, all right? All right, well, we have quite a bit of information so far on our little system, and this is all we're going to develop. There are obviously more planets in this system, but we're going to keep it at this, because right now, this is all we're interested in. these two planets. And so the merchants have made their little enclave in this planet, and we're then going to develop this liquid world. We're going to say it's water. We can say it's a methane ocean, and it can have all kinds of weird creatures. But for the purpose of a war game, we're just going to say this is liquid water, because what we're interested in here, anytime we add solar infrastructure, we're adding an objective for the war game. All right, so we're going to add a moon. I'm just going to say, I don't know how many moons. It could be 5, could be 10, could be whatever. But I'm going to add some moons here to the liquid world. And that's it. So we have Wolf 339. We have our tidally locked world. This is the merchant's capital world. The interplanetary distance in these stars is very short. So it's a very small system, very compact system, a very dark system, because this is a dim star. And then we have a liquid world in the habitable zone with a couple of moons, all right? There are also some razor clouds that are shooting out of the star. And by the way, these effects usually take place in the inner system. There are stars like blue giants where these effects would take place all the way out into the outer system. Not so in our case, so not too bad. So I already have an idea how the merchants have settled this world, and we're going to establish a rule early on, and that is that worlds normally have 6 slots of different assets that you can put on the world to develop its infrastructure, and those assets are either orbital assets or planet-side assets like cities. And depending on the game you're playing, if you're playing a space game, well, maybe you want to add more orbital assets, because that's what's going to be represented on the tabletop. But I have an idea how I can actually add some terrestrial assets and still play a space game. Okay. So, first things first, so 6 slots. Normally, every world will have 6 slots, with the exception of super Earths that have 7. But because this is a harsh planet, we're going to give it a penalty of 1. So -1. That means it's going to have a total of 5 slots. And I could divide my orbital assets and planetary assets whichever way I want. So because it's a harsh world, I'm going to put a terraforming infrastructure card. So, yes, I'm going to have to change the terraforming. It's terraforming, not terrafarming. So some worlds, if harsh, will require terraforming facilities to colonize. Now, if you want to have, let's say you have a super Earth, or you have a forested world, right? You may want the agriculture hub, which is another card that I have here. But this is a pretty harsh world, and the only place where there will be any vegetation is in the terminal zone, which is that middle section of the planet. So terraforming involves atmospheric manipulation. Now, obviously, this world has a way of making its own food, but it's not going to be making any surplus food that the merchants can use to trade. It's pretty much whatever food they make is the food that's there for their own use. So we're going to put some terraforming just to give the backstory that the planet had to be terraformed in order to be colonized. Now, remember, any card that I put here is fair game for a war game. All right? We'll talk about that when we talk about the tabletop setups. Right, the next thing that I'm going to put down, we said we have 5 slots. We're going to put a planet-side industrial district. There has to be a reason why the merchants went through all this trouble of colonizing this world. There's a lot of mining opportunities here, among other things, and that's definitely something that they can use for trade. So that's 2 terrestrial cards already. Now, we need some kind of civilian infrastructure, so we're going to give them a prime city. That's what makes this a capital world. They have a large prime city, which in a tidally locked world would be called a belt city, because it would be built only along the middle hemisphere, the middle portion of the planet, where the temperature is not as bad as in the day side. Despite the fact that these are cool stars, they're still burning hydrogen. They're cool with respect to other stars. But this planet receives a ton of radiation on the day side. So, you know, they're going to use, they're going to have a prime belt city all along that hemisphere. All right, now we have 2 slots left. Now, I think I'm going to give them an orbital shipyard. They need some way of repairing their ships, of constructing ships. We're going to give them that. And then you know, there's a lot of options here. We have a naval starbase. They need some kind of security here. We have an atmospheric defense layer, which we could use, just call it an orbital slot for the time being. I don't know, guys. Well, you know what? I think I'm going to give them an orbital defense and surveillance satellites card. That's a network of automated defense satellites and platforms. Can be used to support orbital security fleets in capital worlds. I don't have an orbital security fleet. Powerful telescopes for surveillance. Okay, so this includes telescopes which could help us detect what's coming into the system. However, red dwarfs are very dark systems. So, and they also have a lot of radiation and EMP effects, so that could mess with our surveillance systems. All right, depending on the storms. All right, well, that takes care of our planet. And we're going to put our home fleet right here. We're just going to put these tokens. This is Void Admiral tokens. These are Void Admiral tokens. We're going to put them right there, and those are going to be the little home fleets. Now, I have an idea for the interplanetary distance. Because it's so short, and because we economize on fuel consumption, we're going to have our supply lanes there. Shipping lanes can be military supply or trade. That's going to be our primary shipping lane to the liquid world here. Okay, because this liquid world is going to be important for food production. We're going to add this new card, aquaculture hub, water world, large-scale food production, planet side, can represent a broad spectrum of exotic and important food resources for export. Can also be used on any Earth-like world with oceans. Yeah, so we have a submarine world here. Let's move the moon aside because it's got to go on our liquid world. We'll put the moon right next to our little liquid world there. I don't know what I'm going to put in the moon yet. The moons will have 2 slots apiece, okay? And this world goes under the same premise. It could use up to 6 slots. So we can actually develop this world quite well. And I think I'm going to put a colony here. This is not going to be a major city or hub. We could have floating cities or submarine cities if we wanted to, but I'm not going to put that card there. Instead, I'm just going to put, this is a starting colony, or maybe it's a submarine colony, but they're developing food resources in that liquid world. They're probably harvesting a lot of the creatures, and that surplus can then be shipped out. And we're going to say that the merchants in this game have a treaty with the Loyalists. And so they're trading with the Loyalists for now. And the Loyalists will be in one of the neighboring star systems, okay? So this is going to be an important little system for the merchants, for them to trade and make some money. All right, so we have more cards to develop here. And I think most of them, I'm not going to develop the surface of the planet. We're going to develop, most of the assets are going to be orbital. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave it at 5 cards for this world. I have 3 orbital assets. I have a naval starbase. Okay, so let's look at this. We have a naval star base. Can be a major or minor base for fleets of warships and orbital security. Resupply and fuel possible. Those are all ideas for, objectives or little adventure hooks. Orbital shipyard, facility for making both civilian and military hulls. And then we have an atmospheric defense layer. Notice that I use my own scratch builds for the pictures. I try to use them as much as possible. So those three things are going to be added to the liquid world. Now, if I wanted to make my liquid world an entire civilization that would have like submersibles and high-tech submarines, all that stuff, this would be the card I would use. But we already said we're not going to do that. Okay, and on the moon, we're going to have a small orbital station. This is probably going to be for refueling, for supplies, but also as reconnaissance. Okay, so we're going to leave that there, and that's our entire system for the merchants. Now, in order for them to be able to come in and out of the system, we need a Stargate. The vital link for interstellar civilizations can connect star systems and their economies. Okay, so we're going to put a Stargate there. That's going to be important for our merchants to go in and out of the system. That's also going to be important when we design our campaign, which comes next. Okay, so this is our entire system. So the merchants have been pretty busy here in this red dwarf. Okay, they have 2 fleets there. All right, and we have a colony in this liquid world, this water world, and it's a floating colony, or maybe it's a submersible colony. We don't know. We don't. I mean, the merchants are pretty wealthy, right? So they have a lot of economic power. We have an atmospheric defense layer, and then a nice short interplanetary distance with good supply lines. We also have the Stargate, and unfortunately our star is getting grumpy. So we're going to have to look into that when we do our first scenario, because the Stargate is the weakest link here. That's where the Dusk Raids are going to come in to invade. So we're going to set up the Dusk Raids right here. Just put out a little plan for them. And this is my planned system. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the tabletop setups, how the cards will dictate our little tabletop setups, what the objectives are going to be. We're going to outline our scenarios little by little with the cards. And these are new ships that I've built. These are new ships. These are Dusk Wraith vessels. These are all mesh, and I have to finish these guys. But these are all the Dusk Wraiths, and they're a smaller scale. I have to make the squadrons. We're ready to play in a red dwarf system. There's a Stargate. Julie has to paint that. And then we have the merchant ships. This ship has a hangar bay there. And again, these just stand on their own. They don't have bases. Okay. And that's something that I'll talk about in another video. So I have a solo game prepared, but we are going to tie all of this to the cards in the next video.